My wife was carrying my brother's baby, so I packed one bag, walked out the front door, and disappeared so completely that even now, years later, they still don't know where I am. I want to be crystal clear from the very beginning. I'm not writing this for sympathy, validation, or approval. I don't need anyone to tell me I made the right choice. The story is already over. I am somewhere coastal with enough distance from all of it that I can write it cleanly, and some things deserve to be written down. So from the beginning, the company Precision Industrial Fabrication custom spec components for commercial and industrial facilities started when I was 29 years old. A rented unit in a light industrial zone, 2 second-hand machines, 1 employee. I paid out of my personal account for the first 8 months. By year 4, 6 clients on retainer. By year 8, regional presence. By year 12, 40 employees, contracts across 6 states, 2 international buyers, and a reputation built from nothing but relentless work and a standard for quality I refuse to lower for anyone. The house was a separate project entirely. I bought the land 5 years before I met Nara, planned and saved for it, and spent 3 years designing it alongside a builder who learned quickly that I was not the kind of client who accepted close enough. Not a showpiece, a functional, well-built home on good land. Every room serving a purpose, every decision deliberate. That is how I operate. I met Nara at a commercial client event. She was there pitching a landscape design proposal for an outdoor campus environment to a room of people who were already mentally somewhere else. I was the only one who asked a follow-up question when she finished. She noticed. We talked for an hour after the formal part ended, and I asked for her card. I will be honest about her because honesty still matters even now. She was sharp, driven, and self-made in the way I genuinely respect. She had grown her design practice from a single modest contract into a real regional portfolio. She had done it without shortcuts. I admired that because it mirrored how I built my own work. 6 years of marriage, and I believed in it the same way I believed in everything I built, completely without reservation, with full commitment. And then there was Valen, younger than me by 4 years. The kind of charismatic that gets you further than sustained effort does. And he had learned that early. He had moved through a few different roles before I brought him on as sales manager 5 years ago. Family, you know how it goes. You tell yourself proximity and trust are the same thing when they are not even cousins. He was good at the job, and he was good at performing the role of devoted younger brother. Never missed a family dinner. Always had a compliment ready. Told people regularly that I taught him everything he knew about business. There is a specific type of compliment that does not sit right when you receive it, even when it is delivered perfectly. Something in the architecture of it, like someone holding a door open while quietly checking whether your key still works. That is how Valen's compliments landed on me. For years I categorized that feeling under you are probably overthinking this, and kept moving. 2 years into the marriage, Nara and I started trying for a child. One in vitro fertilization cycle that did not take. The months after that went quiet in a specific way. We did not fracture, but we stopped talking about it openly. It became something we carried without examining. Then naturally and without warning, 16 months after we had quietly stopped hoping she was pregnant. 12 weeks along when she told me. Sunday morning, kitchen table. She had taken 3 tests over 2 days before saying a word, because that is how she processed things, privately, methodically, only speaking once she was completely certain. I called my father that afternoon. He went quiet in the way he does when something genuinely moves him. Nara started a note on her phone listing baby names she liked and read a few out to me that evening. We talked about colors for the nursery. She bought 2 books on the subject and left them on the kitchen counter without making a thing of it. 3 days of that uncomplicated, clean reel. On the 4th day I decided to set up a spare tablet we had sitting unused in the home office. My plan was to load it with prenatal tracking apps, her obstetrician appointment calendar, a nutrition reference, something practical she could keep in the kitchen and not have to dig her phone out for. I synced it to our shared cloud account to pull across her existing apps and documents. A folder appeared in the sync queue that I did not recognize. The name was a date 14 months prior. Nothing I had created, nothing I had labeled. I tapped it open. 3 things inside. First, screenshot files. Images saved from a phone. A message thread between Nara and Valen running across approximately 8 months starting 14 months ago. I scrolled through them without stopping. They were not ambiguous. They were not the kind of thing that required interpretation or context or benefit of the doubt. They were exactly what they were, completely and without question. Second, photographs. I will leave it there. Third, a text document. The file name read Thoughts Voice Memo Transcription. Nara had a habit of dictating voice memos to herself when she was working through something difficult, then saving the auto transcriptions. I had seen her do it during the in vitro fertilization cycle. She had explained it once as a way to think out loud without burdening anyone. This one had been saved to this folder and not deleted. I read it fully. It was written in the first person, the way her dictations always were, direct, almost clinical, like she was debriefing herself rather than confessing to anyone. About 2/3 of the way through there was a line about the pregnancy. 4 lines below that a line about timing. I read those 2 lines 3 times. Then I set the tablet face down on the table. Here is what did not happen. I did not throw anything. I did not call her. I did not call Valen. I did not move through any of the motions you would expect from someone whose entire understanding of their life has just been restructured in the space of 4 minutes. None of it. What arrived instead was something I can only describe as cold clarity. Not numbness. I was not numb. I was completely present. But the processing was clean, like a calculation running itself out without interference. Nara was 12 weeks along. The thread started 14 months ago and ran for 8. The timing line in the transcription confirmed what the math had already said. I let the calculation finish. Then I started running back through the last 18 months with the new information applied. Valen's visits during my business travel. 4 occasions I could place specifically times he had come by the house while I was out of state. Always framed as checking in on Nara. I had found it considerate. He had a key given to him 3 years ago when we needed someone to manage the house during a week-long holiday. I thought about how my travel schedule had always been openly discussed in our home. How Nara would mention my upcoming trips at family dinners. How Valen always asked follow-up questions about the timing with what I had taken for brotherly interest. I thought about Nara's evenings, the ones with explanations that were always reasonable and that I had never once questioned because I had never had reason to. A client session running late. A collaborative review with a colleague. A Thursday where she had gone to bed early and I had stayed up working and thought nothing of it. I thought about 4 months ago. A pattern of expense discrepancies in Valen's department. Charges that did not map cleanly to client activity in the quarterly records. I had flagged it during a review and planned to pull the full documentation when I had time. Other priorities had moved ahead of it. The reason for those charges was self-evident now. I sat at the kitchen table until the room got dark around me. I did not turn on a light. When I heard Naira's car in the driveway, I closed the folder, returned the tablet to the home office and went to the kitchen to start dinner. She came in talking about a client revision that was giving her trouble, dropped her bag on her chair, kept talking while I cooked. I asked the right questions. She answered them. We ate. She told me she had been thinking about pale green for the nursery walls and asked what I thought. I told her I liked it. That night she was asleep by 10:15. I waited another hour. Then I went to the home office, opened my personal laptop, not the shared one, created a blank document and sat with the empty page for a moment. At the top I typed 3 words, what I own, then in a second column to the right 3 more, what they think. I looked at the gap between both columns. Then I started filling it in. The 2-column document became 6 pages by 2A. What I own was straightforward. Company ownership structure, land deed, personal accounts, vehicle titles, investment positions, every asset listed by legal origin, what they think mapped what Nara would assume she was entitled to, what Valen had been banking on professionally, and what both assumptions looked like from the outside. The gap between those 2 columns was something I could work with. I closed the laptop, slept 4 hours and woke up with the plan fully formed. Not emotional, structural. Week 1 I retained an attorney I had used previously for a contract dispute. Privilege confirmed before I said anything substantive. 2 questions. What was Nara's legal claim on the house given the land was purchased pre-marriage and construction financed entirely from premarital capital? And what would it take to restructure the company into a single control holding entity without mandatory disclosure to existing stakeholders? Answers came back in 4 days. Her claim on the house was limited. The restructuring was cleaner than I had expected. I gave the attorney a second set of instructions sealed in writing. If I was unreachable for 30 consecutive days, file for legal separation on grounds of constructive abandonment and initiate asset proceedings as structured. He asked only the questions necessary to execute it. The restructuring took 3 weeks through proper channels. Clean, documented, unremarkable to anyone reviewing it from the outside. Valen's minority stake, a goodwill gesture from 4 years ago that he had privately treated as a long-term inheritance, was now governed by a performance-linked buyout clause embedded in the new holding structure. Triggerable on documented cause. The documented cause already existed. I pulled the full financial records from his department. The discrepancies I had flagged 4 months ago and never followed up on. The paper trail was precise and thorough. Human Resources drafted the termination on documented performance grounds. Proper notice periods observed, all filed correctly, scheduled to execute in 45 days. He would receive it while I was already gone. Financial moves happened slowly over weeks. Personal savings transferred to accounts in my name only across 3 separate institutions. Cash withdrawn from automated teller machines in small amounts across different locations. Nothing individually notable, nothing that assembled into a pattern without the full picture. The joint account was left with 3 months of normal household operating balance. Enough that it looked completely untouched. Corvan had been my closest friend since before any of this existed. The company, the house, the marriage. I met him for lunch on a Wednesday. Told him everything from the beginning without editing. He listened without interrupting, which is the thing I have always valued most about him. When I finished, he asked one question. What did I need from him? I told him. He agreed without condition and asked nothing further. The surface of my life during those 6 weeks looked exactly as it always had. I took Nara to 2 prenatal appointments, sat with her in waiting rooms, listened to the heartbeat at the second one, held her hand in the car on the way home. I had dinner with Valen twice. Once at a restaurant near the office where he ordered for the table without asking. The way he always did. Once at my own home where Nara cooked and he praised it and asked about my third quarter numbers with the ease of a man who assumed those numbers would always be partially his. I answered him honestly. He had no reason to know the structure he was standing on had already been changed beneath his feet. 6 weeks after I opened that folder, a Thursday morning arrived. Nara left for her prenatal appointment at 9 a.m. I watched the car back out of the driveway from the kitchen window until it was gone. Then I went upstairs and packed one bag: passport, cash, 2 changes of clothes, personal laptop, nothing else. I walked through the house once, a complete circuit, every room, every space I had spent years designing and building toward a version of a life that had already quietly ended. I did not linger over any of it. I just needed to complete the loop. Then I walked out the front door and pulled it shut behind me. I did not go to the airport first. There was one stop to make, and what I was about to leave there would set every remaining domino in motion the moment I was gone. The registered agent's office was 15 minutes from the house. I walked in at 9:59 a.m., handed the receptionist a sealed envelope of pre-signed notarized processing documents and gave one verbal instruction. Begin in 30 days, complete within 60. Everything inside was sequential and airtight. The restructuring, execution, Valen termination, filing the separation authorization for my attorney. The registered agent had handled my business filings for 9 years. He accepted the envelope, asked nothing, and I left. Then I drove to the regional airport, left the car and long-term parking keys in the glove box, registration in the name of the holding company, paid 30 days of parking fees and cash at the entrance machine. From there the routing was deliberately fragmented. Short-haul movements, cash transactions, no direct line from any hub that would draw a clean arc between home and destination. Within 48 hours I was out of the country. Within 72 somewhere that nothing in my established history would logically point to. What happened back home I know mostly through Corvan in careful installments, only when I asked for them. Over the years that followed I have verified enough of it through secondary sources to trust the picture I am giving you. Nara came home at noon to a quiet house, called my name twice, checked the home office, found nothing visibly wrong, my car being gone registered as ordinary. She tried my phone at 3 p.m, voicemail again at 6 p.m. She cooked dinner and ate alone and told Corvan later she had slept reasonably well that first night. She still believed there was an explanation that would arrive. By hour 48 she called Valen. He was there within the hour, performed his concern with impressive consistency, called local hospitals, reached out to mutual contacts, stayed until late that first night and came back the following morning. I have spent some time thinking about what those 48 hours looked like inside his head. The specific calculus of determining whether my disappearance was coincidence or consequence. He would not have known yet. That uncertainty was its own tax. Missing person report filed at 72 hours. A detective came to the house, asked standard questions, filed the paperwork correctly. Local news ran a brief segment. Well-regarded business owner, no apparent distress, no note, no documented history of instability. Colleagues quoted him as driven and consistent. The story generated modest attention and faded in under a week. My parents did not fade. My father, Severin, is not built for stillness when something demands action. He and my mother exhausted their contact network in the first 10 days, and when that produced nothing, retained a private investigator with a solid regional reputation. The private investigator ran a full digital footprint analysis. Financial trail, travel records device pings, the kind of audit that should unravel most disappearances. Mine produced almost nothing usable. The financial movements were too gradual and too distributed across too long a period to map cleanly. The private investigator told my father that I had clearly not left in distress, that the evidence pointed to a deliberate and carefully planned departure. My father reportedly sat with that information for a long time without responding. My uncle Renwick joined the effort informally at my father's request. Retired after decades in fraud investigation, with a particular brand of patience that comes from years of learning how people conceal things. Not the obvious methods but the overlooked ones. While the private investigator worked financial records and travel manifests, Renwick went quieter and wider. He went through every shared digital space the family had used over the years. Old photo drives, shared cloud albums set up for holidays, group folders that nobody had thought to revisit, old accounts still active, permissions never revoked. He found the shared family cloud storage from 6 years ago. Nara had used a subfolder inside it during the early years of our marriage and had simply never closed it out, never cleared it, apparently forgotten it existed at all. What was still sitting in that subfolder stopped him where he sat. He read everything at his kitchen table on a Tuesday afternoon alone in his house. Then he sat there for 4 days before calling anyone. I do not know exactly what those 4 days looked like for him, whether it was grief or the methodical process of deciding what to do with information like that, or both. Probably both. When he finally called my father, his ask was simple: gather the immediate family for a coordination meeting on the search. Saturday morning, my parents' house. Everyone arrived within the hour. Valen came 10 minutes late, walked in with an easy apology and the practiced warmth he carried everywhere, like something he had packed deliberately. Renwick waited until the room settled. Then he opened the folder he had brought and set a printed document on the coffee table at the center of the room. Nobody spoke. Valen's face moved through 3 separate expressions in about 4 seconds. The first expression on Valen's face was recognition. Not surprise, recognition. The specific micro-shift of someone who has been waiting for a shoe to drop and just heard the sound. He covered it within a second with something approximating confusion, looking at the printed pages on the coffee table the way people look at things they intend to claim they have never seen. Then came the performance of innocence. I was not in that room. I am working entirely from Corvin's account and enough corroborating detail that I trust the shape of it. But anyone who had watched Valen operate long enough would know exactly what followed. He picked up the pages, frowned at them with practiced bewilderment, began a sentence about context and how things can be misconstrued when they are extracted without full. He got 3 sentences in before Severin told him to stop. My father does not raise his voice. He never has. That particular quality of authority that does not require volume. He said 2 words in the tone he reserves for things that are completely final. And Violence stopped mid-sentence and did not start again. Nera was not performing anything. She was sitting with her hands on her knees, 33 weeks pregnant, looking at the table, not denying, not constructing, just settled into it. The way someone looks when they have carried something past the point of being able to hold it. When the room asked her to speak, she talked, and she did not build herself a sympathetic narrative. Just the facts when it started, how long, what she had told herself to keep going. She delivered it with the same quiet precision she brought to everything. And in the end, that precision was the only honest thing left in the room. Ira stood up, straightened her cardigan, and walked down the hallway to the kitchen. The door closed. She did not slam it. She simply closed it and did not come back. Severin sat in his chair for a long time without speaking. He had always carried a quieter affection for Valen, the more socially fluent of his 2 sons, easier in a room, easier to read as successful because he performed it more visibly. That affection appeared to end in that chair permanently and without announcement. Nobody in that room left the same. What followed? I tracked through Corvan in careful increments across months and then years. The extended family did not make declarations. They recalibrated. Invitations circulated in smaller numbers. Calls that had been routine stopped. Nobody held a formal conversation about it. The exclusion happened the way exclusions always happen, quietly and collectively, without anyone needing to organize it. The professional dominoes came on schedule. Valen arrived at the company on a Monday morning 6 weeks after I had left and found his access card inactive. A human resources representative met him in the lobby and handed him his termination packet, documented performance grounds, every procedural requirement properly observed. He retained a lawyer within the week. The lawyer reviewed the architecture and gave him a straight assessment. The structure was airtight, the documented cause was clean, and pursuing it would cost him significantly more than accepting the buyout. The minority stake paid out at contractual minimum valuation, a number that bore no resemblance to the figure he had spent years privately treating as a future asset. He took it. That closed his connection to everything I had built. Nera's claim on the house stalled precisely as anticipated. She could not sell it freely, could not claim it outright, and could not sustain it indefinitely on an income that was already contracting. Her client referrals thinned across the following year. No announcements, just the gradual cooling of callbacks that had previously come without effort. Valen and Nera ended up together by attrition, which was never going to hold. It lasted under a year before financial pressure and compounding resentment finished it. Whatever they had constructed in those 8 months of messages bore no resemblance to what they actually were once everything surrounding them had been stripped away. The baby, a boy, was born healthy in the spring, completely innocent of all of it. He grew up in an arrangement that neither of his parents had the stability to maintain well between 2 people who could not share a room without generating friction. Neither of them knew how to stop producing. Years moved. Family gatherings happened in reduced configuration. My parents aged. The missing person case went cold officially, though Severin never fully closed it in his own mind. Corvan told me once without me asking that my name still came up at every gathering, not with anger anymore, just with a persistent unresolved weight of something that had been going on too long without an ending. 5 years to the month after I walked out the front door, I went to the mailbox on a cold winter morning. Plain white envelope, no return address, her first name only on the front, her first name only in handwriting she had known since I was 8 years old. She stood at the mailbox for a moment holding it in both hands. Then she went inside and sat down at the kitchen table alone. Inside the envelope was a single photograph. Nothing else. I know what happened next through Corvan, who received a call from Severin roughly an hour after I opened it. My father asked him quietly, not demanding, not accusing, whether he had heard from me. Just a man in his 70s holding a photograph of his son and needing to understand if there was a thread he had missed. Corvan told him exactly what I had asked him to say if this moment ever came, that I was alive, that I was well, and that he could not offer anything further. Severin accepted that with the particular grace of someone who has waited long enough that even a partial answer lands like relief. The photograph was me standing beside a wooden sailboat in a harbor I will not name. Blue water, weathered docks, architecture that placed me somewhere distinctly not home. Looking directly at the camera, nothing staged, nothing performed, tanned in the way that builds from months of being outdoors rather than weeks of holiday. Settled in a way that apparently read clearly even in a still image. On the back in black ink 5 words: some disappearances are intentional. Severin looked at the photograph for a long time without speaking. Then he placed it in the inside breast pocket of his jacket. Nera kept the envelope. Corvan said neither of them cried, which I had known they would not. They are not built that way. Word reached Valen through a cousin within the week. I have thought about that moment for him. Not with satisfaction, not with anger, just with a clear understanding of exactly what it would cost him that nothing else had. Financial ruin he had navigated in his fashion. Shame he had constructed walls around. Rage he had had no target for what the photograph told him was the thing none of those experiences had yet delivered. That I had seen everything before I left, weighted completely and found it so thoroughly beneath me that I had not even wanted the architecture of a confrontation. He had spent 5 years bracing for the moment I returned with something, anything. That moment was not coming. The photograph was not an opening. It was a door being closed from the other side. That is a specific thing to carry. I will leave it with him. Now let me tell you about where I actually am. I found a coastal country with a sailing culture, a pace that does not punish stillness, and enough English spoken that I could function while I learned the local language properly. The first year I did very little by design. Took sailing lessons from a retired fisherman who charged by the hour and had no interest in where I had come from. Ate long meals alone and occasionally with people I was gradually getting to know. The quiet was not emptiness. It was what quiet is supposed to feel like before you fill it with obligations that were never genuinely yours to begin with. In the second year I started a small consultancy. Process efficiency and component sourcing for small commercial operations in the region. The same core knowledge I had spent 12 years building applied at a scale with no overhead, no staff, no infrastructure. Wait. It earns enough. It is entirely mine in a way the larger operation, for all its success, never fully was. About the grief, I want to be straight about it because it is the piece most likely to get misread. The marriage I believed in for 6 years was real to me while I was inside it. Losing it even after it revealed itself as something constructed on a foundation I had never been shown still occupied genuine space. I processed that on the water in slow increments across months that eventually became something resolved. Not one clean moment of release, just time applied consistently until the weight was gone. I sent the photograph on the 5-year mark. Not for them. A punctuation mark I placed for myself from a distance where none of it could reach back. I am reading these comments from somewhere coastal, somewhere I have no intention of naming. The silence was never punishment. You cannot negotiate with an empty room. You cannot build a narrative when the other person has removed themselves from your story entirely. They had rehearsed for rage, constructed defenses against confrontation, prepared themselves for the version of me that would arrive demanding something. I gave them nothing to push against. I made the entire consequence of their choices fall back on themselves with no performance from me required, with nothing to contest or redirect or spin. That was always the point. Some disappearances are intentional. Mine was. And given the exact same morning, the exact same folder, the exact same quiet kitchen, I would walk out that front door again without breaking stride. Thank you so much for watching till the end. Wishing you all the best, stay healthy, and take care.